The knock on my office door was soft, almost apologetic. I did not look up from the contract I was reviewing, assuming it was another associate with paperwork. But then her perfume hit me. Jasmine and vanilla, sharp and sweet, like a blade dipped in honey. My throat tightened. 10 years had passed, yet I would recognize that scent in the dark. Ellen. Jimmy, she said, her voice trembling. I had to see you. I lifted my gaze slowly, my pen freezing mid-signature. Time had not been cruel to her. Her blonde hair still fell in waves. Those strands of silver shimmered beneath the office lights. Her eyes, once a bright Arctic blue, were stormy now, heavy with shadows. She wore a faded designer coat, its hem frayed, and clutched a handbag that had gone out of style 5 years prior. The sight of her unraveled me, stitch by stitch. You look successful, she said, forcing a smile. Her gaze darted around the room. The mahogany desk, the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Manhattan, the gold-plated nameplate, James Baker, partner. I had built this life without her, because of her. What do you want, Ellen? I said, colder than I intended. She flinched. To talk. To explain. I made a mistake, Jimmy. A terrible mistake. The air thickened. Memories surged. Her laughter at our kitchen table. Her tears the night she packed her suitcase. The way she had spat. You will never be enough. I had believed her. For years, I had believed her. But here she stood, brittle and pleading, while I sat in a suit worth more than our first car. The irony tasted like ash. I am Jimmy Baker, a man who once measured his worth in overtime hours and discounted groceries. Ellen was my college sweetheart, the woman who swore forever in a dusty chapel outside Tulsa. We were happy, or so I thought, until Sean Campbell walked into her yoga class. He was everything I was not, a venture capitalist with a penthouse in Miami, and a smirk that promised decadence. Ellen wanted his world, not mine. She left me with a note on the fridge and a dent in our savings account. Sean, I learned later, was a gambler, not just with money, but with people. He collected wives like art, discarding them when their novelty faded. By the time Ellen realized this, I had already sold our house, moved to New York, and buried my heart in corporate law. Success became my revenge. Before we go further, I want to thank each of you for being here. To those who have subscribed, your support fuels this channel. To those who have not yet hit that button, I cannot wait to welcome you. This story is raw, real, and personal. Share your thoughts in the comments. Would you forgive someone who destroyed you? Let us dive back in. Ellen shifted closer, her heels clicking like a metronome counting down to chaos. Sean lost everything, she said. The lawsuits, the debts. I had nowhere else to go. I leaned back in my chair, studying her, the woman who once called me. Small now seemed smaller than the ghost I had mourned. Part of me ached to reach for her. The other part, harder and wiser, whispered, she chose this. You left, I said. You chose him. I was scared. Her composure cracked, tears streaking her mascara. I wanted security, a family. You were always working, always tired. Sean made me feel alive. And now, her silence was answer enough. I stood, walking to a window. The city sprawled beneath me, a kingdom of steel and ambition. You should go, I said. But as her footsteps faded, I stared at my reflection, a man who had clawed his way from ruin, yet still carried the scars of her absence. The question lingered, sharp as broken glass. Can a heart heal twice? The human mind is a merciless archivist. Long after Ellen left my office, I found myself trapped in the dusty shelves of memory, pulling down volumes of our past I had sworn to burn. The year was 2013. We lived in a cramped 2-bedroom house in Dayton, Ohio, its walls papered with promises we could not afford. I was a junior attorney at a firm that paid me in stress, chasing partnerships like a dog chasing cars. Ellen taught yoga at a studio downtown. Her optimism as bright as the neon sign outside their door. We were happy, or so I told myself. But happiness is a fragile currency. It corrodes in a rain of unmet expectations. Ellen began staying late at the studio, claiming new clients wanted evening sessions. She bought dresses that clung to her like secrets, lipstick shades too bold for grocery runs. I noticed, of course. A husband always notices when his wife's laughter sharpens into something foreign. Yet I said nothing. Fear is a silence that metastasizes. Then came the night of our 5th anniversary. I had booked a table at La Mer, a restaurant with linen napkins and prices that required a second mortgage. I arrived home early, clutching roses and a pendant she had admired in a catalog. The house was empty. Her note on the counter was brief. Emergency class. Do not wait up. I waited. Midnight bled into the walls. When she finally stumbled through the door, her hair smelled of cigar smoke and bourbon, stenches she had once detested. Her collar was misbuttoned. Long class, I said, the word serrated. She would not meet my eyes. A student needed guidance. Her student had a name, Sean Campbell. Sean was a hurricane in a tailored suit. He had blown into town that spring, buying up foreclosed properties and flaunting a Ferrari that purred outside the yoga studio each evening. Ellen joked about him at first. A caricature of greed, she called him. But jokes are often masked for fascination. I learned the truth piecemeal. A receipt for a hotel in Cincinnati. A text that lit up her phone at dawn. Last night was magic. When I confronted her, she did not deny it. She stood in our kitchen, arms crossed, as though I were a stranger overstaying his welcome. He listens to me, she said. He sees me. And I do not? My voice cracked. You see bills, deadlines, failures. Her words were ice. Sean sees possibilities. Possibilities. A sanitized word for betrayal. She moved out the next week, taking only her clothes and the diamond earrings I had financed for her birthday. The divorce papers arrived by fax. I signed in the dark, my hand shaking, then drove to a bar and drank until the world blurred. What follows heartbreak is not always healing. Sometimes it is free fall. I missed deadlines at work, botched cases, showed up reeking of regret. My firm demoted me, then cut me loose. I rented a studio apartment above a pawn shop, its walls stained with the ghosts of other ruined men. Some nights, I called Ellen's number just to hear her voicemail. You've reached Ellen. Leave a sparkle until she changed it. Sean's Instagram became my torture. Photos of Ellen draped in fur, sipping champagne on yachts. Her smile a weapon. I wondered if she ever thought of me in those moments, or if I had been reduced to a cautionary tale she told at parties. Then, one December morning, I woke to a headline. Local investor Sean Campbell faces fraud charges. The article detailed his Ponzi scheme, the lies, the wives left bankrupt. Ellen's face was absent from the photos. I allowed myself one savage burst of laughter before crumpling to the floor, sobbing. Rock bottom is not an event. It is a language. It teaches you to read the fine print of your own survival. I moved to New York, a city big enough to swallow my shame. I worked 10 jobs, studied late, passed the bar again. The hunger that once fed my despair now fueled me. By the time Ellen reappeared, I had rebuilt myself from scraps, stronger, harder, but never whole. Yet as I sit here now, tracing the scars she left, I must ask, can a man ever truly outrun the ghost of who he was? Rain lashed against the diner window, distorting the glow of neon signs, into streaks of feverish color. Ellen sat across from me, her hands wrapped around a coffee mug she had not touched. The steam had long faded, but she clung to it like an anchor. I had agreed to meet her here, a public place, neutral ground, though neutrality felt impossible. The air smelled of grease and regret. "He lied to me," she said, her voice hollow. From the beginning, Sean Campbell had not been a man, but a performance. The penthouse? Leased. The Ferrari? Repossessed within a year. His empire was a house of credit cards, built on forged documents and hollow charm. Ellen learned this slowly, her ignorance wilting into complicity. She signed papers she did not read, smiled for photos she did not want, and ignored the lawsuits piling up like unread obituaries. I thought love was a transaction, she admitted, staring at her reflection in the black coffee. If I gave him my youth, he would give me stability. But stability was another lie. I said nothing. The diner's fluorescent hummed like a distant swarm. She spoke of the collapse. The FBI raid at dawn, agents swarming their Miami condo. The frozen bank accounts. The jewelry box emptied by bailiffs. Sean vanished days later, leaving a note scrawled on hotel stationery. "You were a good time, Ellen. Nothing lasts forever." Her hands trembled. "I sold my wedding ring to buy a bus ticket north. Yours, the one I kept." The admission struck like a slap. That ring, a simple gold band I'd pawned years ago to pay rent, had been her last tether to man she had discarded. I pictured her hawking it in some shadowed shop, the final surrender of our history. I had rehearsed this moment 1,000 times. In my fantasies, I was merciless. I would list her sins like a prosecutor, watch her flinch, and walk away vindicated. But reality was softer, sadder. The woman before me was not the villain of my memories, but a ghost, haunted by her own choices. "Why come back?" I asked after everything. Her eyes flickered to mine, then away. "You were the only one who ever loved me. Not the idea of me, just me." The word should have disarmed me. Instead, they ignited a cold fury. "You do not get to say that. You do not get to rewrite what you did." She flinched but did not retreat. "I know. I am not asking for forgiveness. I am asking for help." A laugh tore from my throat, sharp and brittle. "Money? No. Yes. Maybe. But not just." She pressed a fist to her mouth, stifling a sob. "I have nothing, Jimmy. No one. I thought you might understand." Understand. The word curdled in the air. I understood hunger. I understood rebuilding. But I would never understand how she could kneel in the wreckage she had created and call it fate. Memories flickered, unbidden. Ellen in her sunflower dress, twirling in our first apartment. Ellen screaming as I packed her suitcase, hurling a vase that shattered at my feet. Ellen on the courthouse steps, refusing to meet my eyes as the judge finalized the divorce. The woman before me was all of them and none of them. The waitress refilled my coffee, her gaze lingering on Ellen's tear-streaked face. Judgment hovered in the diner, the kind reserved for men who let women cry. I wanted to scream, "She is not what you think. Neither am I. What would helping you look like?" I asked, the question surprising us both. Hope flickered in her eyes. "Alone. A job. Anything. I just need to start over." I studied her. The frayed cuffs of her blouse. The chipped nail polish. The way her shoulders curled inward, as though the world had shrunk her. For a heartbeat, I almost relented. Then I saw it. The faint glint of her diamond earring. The pair I had bought her years ago. One remained, dangling defiantly from her left lobe. "You still have them," I said quietly. She touched the earring, a guilty reflex. I could not part with both. They were a reminder of him, of who I used to be. I stood, dropping cash on the table. Keep the earring. Sell it when the guilt gets heavy. Her face crumpled. Jimmy, please. You chose your life, I said. Now live it. I walked out into the rain, collar upturned, her whispers chasing me like a curse. But as I reached my car, a thought slithered in, venomous and sly. What if this is your test? What if mercy is the only way to finally be free of her? I glanced back at the diner. Through the rain-blurred glass, Ellen sat motionless, a statue of grief. For a moment, I almost turned around. Almost. The envelope arrived on a Tuesday, slipped under my office door, like a secret too ashamed to face the light. Inside were photographs. A boy, no older than 8, with sandy hair and eyes the exact shade of Arctic blue. My hands shook. The resemblance was unmistakable. Ellen's son. My son? The dates gnawed at me. The child would have been conceived weeks before she left. Had she known? Had she hidden it? I paced the room, bile rising in my throat. For 10 years, I had grieved the loss of a future with children, a family, a legacy. Now, here it was staring back at me in glossy prints. A boy wearing hand-me-down sneakers, sitting alone on a park bench. A boy with my chin, her eyes. I hired a private investigator that afternoon. His report landed in my inbox by dusk. Lucas Campbell, born March 15th, 2014. Father, Sean Campbell, custody relinquished, 2021. Mother, Ellen Baker, legal name reverted post-divorce. Current residence, Shelter Safe Transitional Housing, Bronx. The address burned into my mind. I drove there in the dark, rain blurring the windshield, my chest a cage of razors. The shelter was a squat brick building, its windows barred, a flickering neon sign offering hope starts here. I parked across the street, engine idling, and watched. At 7:03 p.m., Ellen emerged, hunched beneath a thrift store umbrella. A child trailed behind her, clutching a backpack half his size. His hair was matted, his jacket too thin for the weather. Ellen glanced both ways before hurrying him down the block, her arm around his shoulders. Protective, desperate, human. I followed. They stopped at a bodega, where she bought a carton of milk and a banana. The boy pointed to a candy bar. Ellen shook her head, her face crumpling before she stiffened and steered him outside. I thought of the woman who once tossed $100 bills at valets, who laughed as Sean popped champagne over yachts. Now she counted pennies in a dimly lit store, her son's hunger a mirror of my own childhood. I confronted her the next morning, ambushing her outside the shelter. She froze when she saw me, Lucas clinging to her leg. You hid him from me, I said, the words more accusation than statement. Her face paled. I did not know how to tell you. Try the truth. She pulled Lucas closer. He was born 6 months after I left. Sean refused to believe he was his. Demanded a paternity test. When it proved he was Sean, she swallowed. He called him a leech, a drain. By the time Lucas turned 3, Sean was gone. I tried to survive, but the debts, they took everything. The boy peered up at me, curious, unafraid. His eyes held none of Ellen's storms. Just quiet, just light. Does he know? I asked. About you? No. Her voice broke. I could not bear to tell him I failed at love twice. That night, I sat in my penthouse, the city's glow painting the walls gold. The photographs lay scattered on my desk. Lucas at a soup kitchen, Lucas sketching in a notebook, Lucas smiling beneath a slide. A child who existed because of lies, yet innocent of them all. Ellen's plea now made sense. She had not returned for herself. She had returned for him, to give him a life She could not. To use my success as a salvation, the rage came first. How dare she weaponize motherhood? How dare she force me to choose between compassion and self-preservation? But beneath the anger hummed a deeper truth. This boy was mine in every way that mattered. Not by blood, but by fate. A child abandoned, as I had been. A child searching for safe ground. At dawn, I stood outside the shelter again. Ellen stepped out, Lucas in tow, his small hand in hers. This time, I did not hide. She stiffened as I approached. Jimmy? I knelt, eye level with the boy. Hello, Lucas. He studied me, head tilted. Do you know my mom? I did. A long time ago. Are you a lawyer? Mom says lawyers help people. I glanced at Ellen. Her cheeks were wet, her lips pressed tight. Sometimes I said, but friends help more. I handed him a business card, a crude doodle of a superhero on the back. If you ever need one, call me. Okay. He nodded, solemn, as if we had sealed a pact. Ellen mouthed thank you as I walked away. I did not acknowledge it. The DNA test results came back a week later. Probability of paternity, 0%. Lucas was not my son. But as I stared at the report, I realized it did not matter. The world had failed him, just as it had once failed me. Redemption was not in blood, but in choice. The question now was not whether I could forgive Ellen. It was whether I could forgive myself if I walked away. The city buzzed below my penthouse, a symphony of ambition and noise, but all I heard was silence. The DNA report lay on my desk, its verdict screaming in bold type, 0%. Lucas was not mine, not by blood. Yet, as I stared at his photograph, those eyes, so full of quiet hope, I felt a pull stronger than biology. This child was a reflection of every fracture I had survived, every dream I had buried. He deserved better than the scars Ellen and I had carved into the world. I called my lawyer that afternoon. Ellen stood in the park where Lucas played, her posture rigid as though bracing for a blow. The boy raced across the grass, chasing pigeons, his laughter slicing through the autumn chill. I approached, my shadow falling over her. I will not take you back, I said, the words deliberate, final. She nodded, her gaze fixed on Lucas. I did not ask you to, but I will help him. I handed her an envelope. Inside was a trust fund, enough to cover Lucas' education, housing, a future. The money is his. It cannot be touched by debts or you unless for his needs. Trustees will insure it. Ellen's hands trembled. Why? I watched Lucas crouch to examine a leaf, his wonder untouched by the world's weight, because he is not responsible for our mistakes. She reached for my arm, then stopped herself. I loved you, Jimmy. Not the way you deserved, but I did, and I am. Sorry. The apology hung between us, fragile as a moth's wing. I had yearned for this moment for a decade, but now it felt small, almost insignificant. The man she wounded no longer existed. I forgive you, I said, and realized I meant it. Not for her. For me. As I turned to leave, Lucas sprinted toward us, clutching a crimson maple leaf. Look, it's like fire. I knelt, meeting his gaze. It is brave, I said, holding on to beauty even as it falls. He beamed, pressing the leaf into my hand. You should keep it. I slipped it into my coat pocket, a relic of a moment I would never forget. Months later, the leaf sits framed on my desk, a reminder that endings can still burn bright. Ellen and Lucas moved to a quieter town, their letters sparse but hopeful. I do not visit. Some bridges, once burned, should never be rebuilt. Yet, in the stillness of my success, I have found peace. not in revenge nor in romance, but in the quiet act of breaking the cycle. Lucas will never know hunger or shame or the ache of being unmapped. That is my legacy. And Ellen? She is a footnote now, a shadow in a story I no longer read. To every one of you who has followed this journey, thank you. Betrayal, redemption, and the echoes of love are chapters we all navigate. Did Jimmy make the right choice? Could you walk away? Or would you reach back? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Let us unravel this together. If this story moved you, do not forget to like, share, and subscribe. Your support fuels this channel, turning raw wounds into art. Click that notification bell so you never miss a story. And remember, some doors close not to punish us, but to let us breathe. Until next time, Jimmy Baker,